Hey there berries, welcome to the 13.4 patch notes and support tier list. As always, my support tier lists are catered towards if you're new to the game up to around about like high-ish plat. That's where the majority of the player base is. And then once you start entering like super high ELO, a lot of things kind of start changing or not mattering quite as much. Now this patch, if you are a support main, is probably the biggest support change, like patch notes that have dropped probably since like items like Spell Thief's Edge and Relic Shield were introduced. There are a lot of nerfs, honestly, just to put it blunt. There's a lot of nerfs, and but there are a couple of buffs depending on what you like playing. I'll just say this right now: if you are an enchanter or a mage support player, you're going to get hit from this patch. I don't fully understand still why Riot is necessarily taking this direction, but it is what it is. And also, if you are a tank support player, you'll like these buffs because overall they are buffs for tank supports. One thing I like to mention here just before we like get started off properly, I do find it kind of almost outrageous that the systems thing here it's got mentioned here, like, you know, the Spell Thief's Edge and the Spectral Sickle, but instead of labeling them as nerfs, it's the same with the jungle as well. Actually, the jungle's been slightly nerfed. Rather than labeling them under the nerfs tab, they've labeled them under systems. But like, to put it blunt, those two items have been massively nerfed, and we're going to go through all the individual champion changes. Then we'll go through the system changes, and then we'll go through the tier list. It's going to be a lot of information to take in here, but I'll do my best to kind of clear things up and make it understandable for you guys. So let's just jump straight in. We have well, we might as well mention it very briefly. Ahri support is a very off-meta thing that is very rarely played. Is actually technically getting buffed with a lower cooldown on her ulti, and also more armor and more base HP. So it means that her laning phase is stronger, and also the first time you hit level 6, that's also going to be easy to engage. I will say that's still quite a long cooldown in order to actually ult engage, but the Glacial Augment Ahri support thing is more viable now this patch. Alistair, he got buffed last patch. He's now getting buffed again. So we have a 6% to 7% of Alistair's max health. So heal buffed outright. You've also got AP ratio increase on his Q. You've also got an AP ratio increase on his W. So they increased these AP ratios last patch, but they've gone a step further and added more on. I'm not really sure why. Rather than just upping the base numbers, they've decided to up AP ratios. I guess they kind of want like maybe some potential of like an Alistair top lane situation. I think they kind of want some gimmicky YouTube builds, honestly, with these kind of AP ratios. I can definitely see like Alistair, maybe like, you know, some challenger mid lane player playing Alistair mid to smurf on some noobs. Like the AP ratio here is kind of nutty, because if you do hit like 600 AP on Alistair, you're looking at like an 875 damage headbutt combined with something like a 600 damage pulverize or something. So that combo alone is going to do like 1.4k damage. So yeah, it's kind of like if you think about it, it's kind of like a scuffed Malphite ulti, because you have to use 2 button presses to get the Malphite ulti. Plus it's a lot more, like, it's a lot slower, the combo of Alistair. So I don't really see the point. Like, if you want to do this, then why not just do AP Malphite, and then you got this pulverized headbutt combo in his ultimate. Yeah, I don't know. And you don't need to target anything with the Malphite. I don't understand it, honestly. Like, when Malphite's in the game, I don't understand why you'd bother with this. But anyway, whatever. Amumu is getting nerfed this patch. So we've got health growth going down, armor growth going down, and also probably the biggest one that's probably going to affect jungle more than anything is that his W points per point is going down. If you're playing a Amumu support, you're generally putting points in your W quite late anyway, so this isn't really like affecting support Amumu as much. This is like definitely targeted more towards maybe like solo lane Amumu or jungle Amumu. Anivia is getting nerfed. Nothing really to talk about there. Anivia's support was very rarely played, and this won't affect her at all anyway. Annie is okay. So Annie is a big one. Annie got giga buffed last patch, and I think Riot realized they kind of messed up a little bit. But the changes that are going into Annie here aren't that severe. She's still actually incredibly annoying. If you don't know, they made Tibbers stronger, like scale with AP, like giving him more armor or magic resistance. They've also made it so that I think they lowered down the Tibbers ulti cooldown as well, and they brought that back up again. So let's go through it. So last patch, Annie was probably the strongest support that you could play. I didn't put her on a tier list last time because I legit said I had no idea where she was going to be placed. Like, it seems good. Annie's support seemed viable, but I didn't know how good it was going to be, and it's pretty damn good. It's like last patch. If I was to do the tier list again for last patch, she would have been tier 1. I've been playing her a little bit. I think I've got a 100% win rate still on my Diamond 1 account with her. So yeah, her laning phase is going to be slightly squishier. Also, briefly mention, you know, Spell Thieves is getting nerfs, so she will be impacted a little bit by this. Molten Shield as well. The flat damage is only going down by like a little bit. But the thing is with Annie, the Annie support build, it's like you are maxing Molten Shield first. So this is quite a severe like retaliation damage hit. But honestly, the main reason why you were using it was for the insanely low like kind of movement speed, and the fact that if anyone did hit the shield, you would have a Rylai's, so you would slow them down. So this is why this is better than like a Karma shield, because it's like the speed of a Karma shield is roughly the same as a Molten Shield, but then the shield value is roughly the same. You got retaliation, which then can proc Rylai's. So Annie is basically a better Karma, really, honestly. The only thing that Karma has over Annie is better poke during the laning phase, but it's like raw damage poke, whereas Annie has like crowd control, harassment, potential poke, where it's like that is like more dangerous for setting up for jungle ganks. Now the Tibbers ulti cooldown going down for going up from 120 to 130, I don't think makes that much of a difference. When I was playing Annie, when I had the when I was level 11, I'd put down Tibbers. Sometimes Tibbers would survive the full duration, and then my ulti would nearly be back up again anyway. So this is going to be like, this is like, in terms of keeping Tibbers alive, this isn't really going to be a massive change anyway, because by the time you've got like your Shurilias, Rylai's isn't going to necessarily like reduce the cooldown rate, but like just the Shurilias alone, plus like CDR boots of lucidity, the cooldown on Tibbers gets pretty low anyway. And if you summon Tibbers, and if Tibbers is out, the cooldown still keeps ticking on in the background. So it's like, this isn't like the true duration of like the ult itself. So yeah, I mean, the ult fill is like, this probably could be nerfed more. Honestly, this could probably go up to like 140, etc. But yeah, Annie will still be very strong this patch. Affinio stuff, Azir is getting gutted, which is kind of insane, but we won't talk about that. That's not support. Cho'Gath stuff, I mean, Cho'Gath support has always kind of been like on the cards. His rupture mana going down is good. One of the main problems where you can't do Cho'Gath support is because his mana costs are like absurdly high. They're usually quite high because of his passive. If he lasts his minions, he gets mana and health back. It's going to be interesting to see if anyone tries to do a Cho'Gath support. I probably won't be, but the mana cost like on the Feral Scream as well, it's going down quite a significant amount. So in some third dimension realm of weirdness, we could do like a third dimension. We're on a third dimension. I don't know, the 10th dimension. Someone might be trying Cho'Gath support and it might work out. Okay, Elise. That doesn't affect us. Jarvan doesn't affect us. Jax as well, a bunch of stuff. Malphite stuff, don't care. Alright, Maokai changes. He's getting nerfed. Which is, I mean, Maokai support wasn't really paid much anyway. I know there's a few of you guys out there that do play Maokai support still. But yeah, he's getting nerfed overall. But I think these are like generally targeted towards the jungle rather than support. And also they seem to be hating on a lot of AP jungles right now, hence why they nerfed Amumu. nerfing Maokai, they're also nerfing Demonic Embrace. So yeah, just general nerfs of Maokai. I don't regard him as like super strong, but or something that you should necessarily learn. But I know there's people out there that play it. Now, Orianna is getting buffed, higher armor levels, which makes it good, and W mana cost going down, which is good. So this isn't enough to kind of make her support viable. If they did something to her E here, then we would be talking like maybe some interesting things here. I think this is a good start in order for Orianna to be support viable. But she needs an E buff. If she gets an E buff in the next couple of patches, Orianna support actually could be viable. Okay, could be. Big could. It'd be probably be like tier 3, but it would be viable. At these changes still probably put her still at like maximum tier 4. But this is like, these are very good support buffs, honestly. This will help her in lane, of course. But like these base numbers here, the mana cost in particular is really good. Anything we have too high mana costs makes it kind of unviable. And if you're going to do like an Orianna support, you probably would want to max W first. So saving a little bit of mana here and there definitely helps. So keep an eye on that one in future patches. Ribbon changes. Samira's getting nerfed, which isn't probably a thing that you care about much if you are in like unranked to plat, but she was becoming quite strong in high elo. I don't think these nerfs are enough, but Samira will stop going from like SS pick to like S pick. She's still going to be like really good. All right, Senna buffs. Senna got buffed last patch, and she's getting more buffs now. Attack ratio, basically that's going up by 0.1, which is percentage wise is huge. That is like a huge upgrade. And then also her ulti is getting pretty significantly buffed. So once you hit level 11, that the damage number is going to go up. Also, you got more scaling on bonus AD. So we're looking at around about an extra like 30-ish damage on your ult cast, which, you know, on paper doesn't sound that much, but if you take that AD value and attach it to an item, that's like 1,000 gold being added onto this ability. And then you've also got a huge amount of cooldown reduction there, minus 20 seconds. Generally, I wasn't going too heavily into cooldown reduction, but you can definitely, if you go like Navori Quick Blades and then maybe into like something else that has cooldown reduction, then you're definitely going to be getting this down to a pretty low number. You're probably better to ult like almost, if you hit 16, you're better ult like every minute, essentially, once a minute, which is huge for a global ulti that does damage and shields allies. So your late game Senna is looking particularly strong right now. So yeah, keep an eye on this one. I will say though, the meta direction of tanks being stronger doesn't help Senna. So it's nice that she's like received these buffs, but will it offset the tank supports being buffed? We'll have to kind of like wait and see properly. But for me, I've been enjoying playing Senna a lot lately, and these are nice changes for me. Thresh changes as well. He got buffed last patch. They weren't enough. So it's not a full buff. They're nerfing his W, so let's go through it individually. So his Q, which is his hook, is going up AP ratio by 10%. Also, base damage is being increased by 5 extra per level, up to 20. So generally, I was maxing Q, but I think they're trying to make it so that you can potentially max like E first instead of Q, which I don't see why you would ever do, to be honest. So they've also reduced the cooldown of Death Sentence, which is max level 11, and it goes down to 9, and as it notes, if you do hit a target, it goes down by 3 seconds. So you're going to have cooldown reduction in your kit anyway. Every time you land a hook, really, once you hit 5 points in Q, with a little bit of cooldown reduction, honestly, you're looking at something like 4 seconds cooldown on your ulti, really, on your ulti, imagine, on your Q. So that's an insane low cooldown on your Q at max points. So you're 100% going to be maxing Q. If you weren't already, then you were trolling. But now you definitely will be maxing Q. This is insanely low cooldown in high stages, in later stages of the game. They are nerfing Lantern. Well, but they're buffing Lantern in terms of like, they want you to max Lantern last, okay? But they're like, if you max Lantern first, because that was kind of thing done in pro play, then you're getting a nerf there. And it's quite like a 1 second longer on the cooldown on max point, a little bit of a less shield. But in terms of the actual 1 point in W, you got 1 second off on your W. So it's like it's a buff if you go Q max basically. And then his E has a flat AP ratio increase, plus also, is it +5? It's +5 and then +10, +15, +20. So it scales, you get more rewarded, more per point that you're putting into this ability, but still you do Q, E, W. Yeah, I mean, Thresh is one of those champions that is really difficult to actually play in the lower ELOs, but primarily because people just don't click this Lantern. And honestly, if you can land your hook, you can get the good engage on, you can be able to hook a couple times in a fight, but if no one clicks your Lantern, then it will ruin the majority of fights. And honestly, it's still going to be a problem in, like, you know, unranked to gold. I've had plenty of cases in diamond where people don't click the Lantern or just don't pay attention to it. I think if they do some sort of like graphical update, like with arrows or something, make it clearer that the Lantern's on the ground, then Thresh will become a more viable pick in the lower ELOs. But above plat, like plat higher, I don't, because of this W, it gets so little usage. So it's kind of hard to say whether or not like Thresh will see any significant win rates below Diamond. But Diamond plus Thresh is looking like a pretty good pick. Udyr changes. Veigar. Okay, so Veigar, hear me out. Okay, I used to play a little bit of Veigar support. One of the biggest issues I had with Veigar support is his range. On his Q was difficult to actually harass the enemy without taking bad trades. They're massively increasing the range of his Q by 100 and also increasing the range of his W by 50. This is really good. Really good for AP carry Veigar. I mean, obviously for mid lane Veigar, AP carry Veigar, and support Veigar. One issue I have though is because we'll go through it in a second. The Spell Feast nerfs, reducing mana regeneration. He will have mana issues at the start of laning phase, but I will be definitely testing out this attack range, whether playing AP carry Veigar or support Veigar. I want to see how it is, but this is pretty damn good. And I think there's a lot of lower ELO players that know roughly how to play Veigar. It's just kind of like one of those champions that you probably have played when you've been learning the game. And this range should feel really nice. It should feel really good. And it helps you combat against the longer ranged AD carries. Like if you're up against like a Caitlyn, you might be able to get your Q in this time rather than basically never. So yeah, keep your eye on that one. Viego stuff. Alright, Demonic Embrace. It's just a jungle change, so don't have to worry too much about the Brand or Zyra. Spell Feast Edge, once we get to that, that's the thing you're going to have to worry about. Doran's Shield is getting nerfed, which is some AD carries, if you were playing like Brand or Zyra, might pick up a Doran's Shield to help mitigate like the Brand dot or the Zyra plant dots or whatever. That has been nerfed, so that's AD carries will never be picking this item up now. Okay, the support item adjustments. I mean, that's a pretty weak term for what's happening. It's a giga change and they're understating it like massive. But Relic Shield base health regeneration is going up by 25%, which then means that the Targon's Bracer also goes up to 75%. This is I wouldn't say this is like a massive buff for tank supports, but it's two things are happening here. This health regeneration is obviously going to be a minor buff. It means that if you are taking random poke damage in lane, particularly early on, against like the the Lux supports, the Zyras, the Brands, or like the Nami's poking you, or the Soraka's landing Q, you're going to be able to mitigate that damage a lot more. But entwined with the Enchanter and Mage nerfs, which are about to come here, it makes Relic Shield like go. Relic Shield went from like an okay-ish item, pretty annoying to last hit and get gold from, particularly in the mid game onwards, to, well, actually now this item is now pretty good, because the alternate Spell Thieves is now kind of, it's not terrible, but it's like it's gonna suck. It's gonna take us so long to get used to. So Spectral Sickle, charge generation time increased from 10 to 12 seconds. Okay, and that's gonna same with the upgrade at 500 gold. Spell Thief's Edge as well is getting hit for the exact same thing with the charge generation rate. And then as you can see, the mana generation on everything is being reduced. So you've got 25%, 25%, and then you lose 15% finally at the very end. So you make up an extra 10% from completing the item. And obviously the same is happening with Steel Shoulder Guards in terms of the health regeneration. So this will affect Senna. She'll get less gold in lane. And the Spell Thief's Edge, you'll get less gold in lane. Let's talk about the gold. So charge time going from 10 to 12 seconds. It doesn't seem like a lot, but I want you to think about the laning phases that you've had. Particularly the ones where you've just about had enough gold to convert your Spell Thief's Edge into a Frostfang. It happens all the time for me. Where it's like, oh, I only need 3 more gold on Spell Thief's Edge. I can wait for that in my fountain, and then I've got wards. With this change, you will be, that will not happen. You will miss out on opportunities to generate gold, and you will be potentially like 40 to 60 gold behind. So not only will you have 40 to 60 gold less on that recall that we're talking about, usually it's the first recall, can be sometimes the second recall, you're going to have less gold to purchase items. So that could mean one, you know, you won't be able to buy a control ward, or you will get a control ward, but then you have to give up on like an amplifying tome or something like that. This means that you will get wards in later in the laning phase, which means that bot lane is going to be more prone to being ganked. So those things combined, it is a huge knock-on effect to everything that you do very early on in the laning phase. Like, obviously, you know, as the game progresses on, once you finally complete the item, this charge generation thing means nothing to you. But the early stages of laning phase will be harder. It would just be harder. You might miss out on an item, you might miss out on more charges. It's going to be painful at times. Because if you see your gold at 480 and then you have to recall now after this patch, you got hit by the nerf bat because you probably would have had the extra gold if you had the charge generation. So this affects a lot. It's very annoying. And as I said, you will be now more prone to jungle ganks. It means Oracle's lens is now stronger in bot lane. So you might want to start opting, particularly if you're playing a tank support or an engage in like mage like Annie, for example. I think going into lane, dropping a ward, and then recalling, picking up Oracle's lens afterwards, I think will be more meta. Because there'll be definitely fewer wards at the start of the laning phase, and you will be clearing out more wards. Well, you'll be clearing out like easier wards, if that makes sense. So yeah, because by the time you've used your oracles to clear out the trinket wards, then it's like, you know, the enemy is blind. So yeah, bot lane is going to be, I don't want to be so dramatic, but I feel like particularly the high elos you go, as more junglers will learn to exploit this vision. We're in for a rough time, and it's not just you, it's your AD carry as well. Like, if you are playing a losing matchup from champion selection, say if you're, you know, if you are playing a scaling bot lane up against a hard engage bot lane, say if you're up against like Samira, Leona, and you're playing something scaling like Sona plus, I don't know, a Kaiser or something like that, like, you are going to be so screwed because of the lack of vision that you're going to be able to implement. You're going to have a tough time like getting gold generation anyway, and then also your mana regeneration as like playing Sona is down, so that is going to cost you probably 1 or 2 W's in the lane. So for some extreme cases of like you are playing a losing matchup just because of how champion selection went, it's gonna feel rough, and then the enemy team is more likely to get plates because they can exploit the fact that they know you haven't got vision. It's gonna like one of the things that Riot said is that they didn't want they wanted the game to be less snowbally. That's one of the reasons why I think they nerfed AP jungles, and I think they did a couple of other things. I think they reduced XP gain per kill now this patch, but this snowballs bot lane harder just purely because of this. This one change makes bot lane more snowbally, and rewards champions like Draven, Samira, and tanks are getting buffed. So hard engaged tanks are now getting stronger. So I don't think they fully thought of this through. I don't think they realized that the potential consequences of this one thing alone could honestly make bot lane depressing to play. Unless you are absolutely sticking to the hard engage meta. So I think this will potentially, in high elo at least anyway, it probably won't affect the lower elos just as yet, and there's still time for them to revert this. If they revert this next patch, then I think if you're in iron, bronze, maybe silver, you probably won't notice this shift in change until maybe nearer the end of the patch, because there's a trickle-down effect that happens once something gets discovered in high elo, and then starts like trickling down from people watching streams, etc, and like it trickles down into like the lower elos. Sometimes like bronze and iron don't see the meta shift until a patch or two later, and sometimes like the patch has already changed by then, so they're playing something like that was meta last patch but isn't like right the current patch. It's kind of funny sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry to hamper on this, but this change could and probably will change the whole ecosystem of bot lane. So yeah, I as a support main, I'm up for changes, but this should be introduced during preseason or mid-season and then tested out properly. Introducing this change, this support fundamental change, into a middle of a like, you know, we're on patch 0.4. This should have been introduced in preseason or waited for mid-season, honestly, because I think this could be really bad. We'll find out. I don't want to be like the harbinger of bad news and stuff, but like this yeah, okay, I'll stop being stunlocked by this because I'm stunlocked by looking at that. But yeah, magical boots are being nerfed, but I didn't even know this was a thing. You could sell the boots, I think, for 300 gold, magical footwear, and people were selling them to get a quicker mythic. I'm not sure why necessarily you'd want to do that, because mythical boots had the extra movement speed on anyway, but I don't know if like the normal boots would still give you the extra movement speed. So I don't understand what's happened here, but pro players are being pro players, I guess. Treasure Hunter getting nerfed, that affects a couple of champions. Like you might pick this up on like Brand or Zyra if you're feeling adventurous, but I think overall supports generally weren't taking Treasure Hunter anyway, and it got nerfed, so you probably won't be taking it now anyway. Herald is going to leash easier, just so that you know, just in case you don't get trolled in your game. So like leash range is being increased, but it will giga reset now if brought out of the range, rather than like hang around a bit. So just that you're aware of that. Gromp is easier to kill, which I would say it would affect bot lane if it wasn't for the fact that Gromp used to give health and mana, so the AD carry would sometimes take Gromp. It being easier to kill might mean that the AD carrier might be more inclined now to kill Gromp, if you're waiting for a wave to crash in under turret, but you'll still take a lot of damage from it. So it's Gromp overall, killing Gromp when you're on that side of the map, it's not going to be massive of a change. I wouldn't worry about that too much. And then here is the XP changes. So XP into the late stages of laning phase has kind of been reduced by a good chunk, honestly. Like particularly if you look at the level 6, you kill someone level 6 with your ultimate, you're only getting half the XP, which is kind of weird. That's also going to probably lead to some slower late games. Because if you look at like level 10 here, for example, it's the same, but like this spike, I guess, between like level 6 and like level 9 is going to be slower if you get some kills. The most significant XP drop is probably from like, was it level 4? And you barely get the XP jump there is actually quite a lot, from 70 XP from level 3 to level 4. So it makes sense. This is making more sense in terms of like streamlining the XP, whereas there are some kind of unusual spikes here, like 400 XP for killing someone at level 6 when like up. Yeah, like 52% of level, 49% of level is quite extreme kind of scaling there. So overall, people will be hitting mainly this kind of mainly affects assassins the most, because they're the ones usually going around picking up the most amount of kills. So assassins will potentially be like a level lower, which is good for us at least anyway. Nothing really else. ARAM changes. I don't think there's anything else to talk about here. Mythic shops getting changed. There's going to be a Prestige Coven Zyra and a Project Ash Chroma if you play Ash support. And then we'll go into the tier list now. What skins are there? I'm kind of curious for myself. There's a Zeref skin. Skins look okay. They don't look super amazing. Right. Tier list time. That took a while. That took 31 minutes to go through the patch notes. Okay. So we've got some upsetting things here maybe, and we'll go through a lot of the stuff. Tier 4 and Tier 5 have not changed. Tier 3. So once again, I'm going to repeat it again because people usually just skip to this point and then just complain about, oh my god, Thresh is so good right now, he should be like S tier. Like, this tier list is catered towards unranked to mid-plat, okay? You can see Thresh there at tier 3. In high elo, he's probably going to be tier 2, maybe even tier 1, okay? Tier 2 is probably where he's going to be in high elo. People do not click Lantern, as explained in the patch notes. That's why he's tier 3 and not higher. But he will be good if you have teammates able to utilize it and stuff. It's just too RNG based whether people are going to click Lantern or not, honestly. One of the biggest things that's probably happened this patch is Nami's now being reduced to tier 3. I feel like she struggles with mana quite a lot in the early laning phase. She chugs through mana like crazy. The nerfs she had already a couple of patches ago put her into tier 2, and she felt like okay-ish to play. She's definitely still going to be like viable if you want to play her, but she's not going to be like the best enchanted to play. So you're definitely going to have more mana issues, but also she is highly susceptible to the hard engage supports like Nautilus, like Thresh, like Leona, like Blitzcrank, and you will probably see a huge, start seeing a much more like people more inclined to play those kind of champions now because they've been buffed. Like Relic Shield's been buffed, so yeah. And Senna also doesn't do too badly against Nami, so yeah, she's not in the best of positions right now. Also, Lucian's not being played that much either, and that's quite a good synergy matchup. So yeah, Nami's kind of just falling off. I think she's like, as I said, she's like okay if you really want to play her, but it's the win rate overall will probably be around about 50%. Like nothing special, just okay. Renato, I've moved down from tier 2 to tier 3. She does quite well into Nautilus specifically as a counter matchup, but everything else she kind of just is not going to be that great with. The main reason why she's quite good against Nautilus is because if Nautilus goes for a hook on you, if you quickly double tap Q and push Nautilus away, he won't be able to land his passive on you. But that doesn't help much when she hits 6. So like very early laning phase, you can do that if you're good enough. But yeah, everything else really, like generally she can be okay at like disengaging, particularly if there's a lot of melee. There's going to probably be another tank on the enemy team, so that could end up being the case. But overall, I feel like she's just been falling off anyway. She's like a really kind of unique and honestly kind of fun champion to play. But once again, she's starting to fall off as well. Tanks, like the Maokai is getting nerfed, as I mentioned a little bit in the last patch, but I don't think he's going to be that great even with the relic shield changes. Brom is finding some difficulty playing. I think the one champion here that I feel like, okay, could actually be moved up to tier 2 is Leona. I kind of want to hold on that at the moment. I've always felt like Leona was like a easy champion for a new player to learn and get into, but the champions that always do best, particularly in unranked to gold, is the champions that bring the unit to you. I think Leona's kit is very good. I think her ulti is amazing. But there's a disconnect between you going in and then your teammates following up, particularly in silver, bronze, iron, unranked. So you can find success with Leona if you can find an AD carry to duo with, and then like you're in sync with the engages and you're playing like Samira and Draven. Well, you're probably not playing Draven at that ELO, but you get the gist, right? But there's a disconnect when you're going in and then you're by yourself and then you're kind of like left alone, and Leona can't get out. Once she goes in, she cannot get out. Whereas something like the Alistair instead kind of has the same kind of baseline kit as Leona, but his ulti can enable him to get out of some really rubbish situations when he does engage. Also, he has the potential to kind of like flank around and then headbutt someone into your team to make it super obvious, like you need to focus that target because they're right in front of your face. So that's why Alistair is higher rated than Leona. Another champion that kind of goes in and kind of leaves himself isolated is Amumu. And the reason why he is slightly better than the Leona, I will say this isn't by much, is because of the amount of crowd control he can do is higher than Leona. You're going to be squishier than a Leona playing a Mumu, but the amount of crowd control that you can do is just that little bit extra over Leona. Plus, if you have AP users on your team in the mid game onwards, his passive will increase the damage that target takes, combined with Even Shroud can make it so that the person that you go on will probably die, as opposed to you don't know. So you've got 2 stuns, you've got your ultimate, you have a lot of tools in your kit in order to make plays happen, and you have 2 attempts of going in as well, whereas Leona E, you only got 1 attempt of going in, Amumu has 2 attempts. Plus, Amumu can Q to a minion or a jungle creep in order to get away from like a bad situation, which does help. It increases survivability in that area. Nautilus kind of brings the person to you, and it kind of makes it more obvious that the target needs to be focused. Also, he has a way to disengage by hooking himself to a wall in order to dash away. So yeah, he is probably if you want to learn to play hard engage with these support changes, Nautilus would probably be my recommended pick overall. His hooks are very generous. He has a lot of crowd control in his kit. His ultimate basically is a point and click guaranteed crowd control land, which can make it obvious what target to kind of focus as well, and also enables any dash champions that you have on your team to go focus that person that you ulted to help with the follow-up. So yeah, Nautilus overall, it's pretty tanky, good engage, has a disengage. Overall, looking pretty good right now. Taric, interesting champion. I didn't quite know where to put him. Taric generally does well against champions he can melee, because it means he gets more heals and he does more damage with his passive. So like Taric would be pretty good if he can survive the initial engage into things like Leona, Nautilus, Amumu. The question is, I can't really quite remember because I haven't seen a Taric in such a long time, is can Taric survive that initial engage if he does get engaged upon? Because once he can, if he can, his heals will be absurd. And a lot of people don't realize it, but the amount of healing that Taric does, if he's allowed to bash and do auto attacks on like an enemy tank, it's huge, particularly early. So I think Taric will be a good anti-tank. I would not play Taric if you're playing against an enchanter or a mage though, because you'll find it very difficult. You'd have to do some flash stuns and work with an engage AD carry for in order to start to work. Zac, he doesn't have the easiest way of getting out. He can like fling himself in, and then with enough points, once you get like 5 points in your E, you can kind of get out sometimes, because the cooldown on the leap generally goes quite low. Kind of the same problem as Leona. It's kind of hard to necessarily make it so that your team can like pick one target, but he is just so good at engaging, particularly his engage range, and in the roaming kind of sense, that he's a tier 2 because of that. Also, I think his passive is super underrated, but particularly early in the game, having to waste time and kill Zac blobs while your AD carry is still hitting the enemy team, has a huge amount of value. So yeah, I think Zac's in a low tier 2 spot, but I think he still deserves it. Who else should we mention here? Zilean is a champion that does quite well into champions that want to focus down one target, like the Nautilus, for example. The problem is, though, you cannot get caught out by the Nautilus. Okay, you have to rely on someone else on your team getting caught, which, let's be honest, happens a lot, and then you can just whack your ulti on them. The Nautilus, say, for example, would have used everything. I'm sure some of his teammates would have done some additional stuff as well to try and kill that one individual target, but you just laugh and you just put your ulti on that target, and then the majority of this time that they wasted, you know, using all of their abilities has been nullified. Also, you got ways to engage and disengage with your speed up, but the thing is, you cannot get caught. If you get caught, you kind of ruin everything. So just make sure you're not the one being caught, and then you can get a lot of value with Zilean. Start of the laning phase pre-6 might be a little bit tough, but I think it's doable. Honestly, I think it's doable. Especially with the movement speed, it can get you out, or your AD carry out of a lot of those situations. And also you have a stun. A hard stun is really, really good against like using on the enemy AD carry to prevent like the damage follow-up from when your AD carry gets stunned, for example. Zyra, I believe she was in tier 1. I've moved her down into tier 2. She's going to be generating less gold from spell thieves, which means she can't exploit that quite as much. But I still feel like she's still going to be quite a good blind pick. And if your team does need AP, then there is still a valid reason for it. Senna moved up to tier 2. I don't think Senna will ever be tier 1 on my list. Okay. I think Senna is potentially in a good position, particularly now if you're up against enchanters. And maybe mages. Hard engaged supports like Nautilus, I would not recommend playing Senna at all. But if you're going up against enchanters, I think Senna's a very good pick. She won't ever be tier 1 because, once again, this tier list is catered towards unranked to below plat, and Senna has a very mechanical kind of like curve line, and the majority of players in gold and under won't even kind of like hit the peak or remotely close to the peak of where like Senna mechanics are. But she should be in such a good spot against enchanters and mages right now that doesn't really matter. I think if you are in Diamond Master, maybe Master Plus, playing Senna into enchanters, I think this is a tier 1 pick, just to make that clear. And I think Soraka is generally going to be doing okay. Spell Thieves, mana regeneration nerfs suck, but Soraka has kind of strangely very high mana regeneration rates. They buffed it last year. Her base mana regen is actually very, very high, so I don't think the Spell Thieves is going to affect her too much. I think generally she doesn't generally run out of mana anyway, so she might go once or twice if you do main her, but I think generally you should be having a fine time as long as you're not like just constantly randomly spamming your Qs for no reason, which, to be honest, a lot of Sorakas do. Right, moving up to tier 1, there are a couple of picks here that I'm going to have to explain myself for, I'm sure. Sona will probably get a couple of question marks. I'll leave that one last. Okay, so Janna, really good against harder engaged tanks. Yes, Spell Thieves got nerfed, but she never really had mana issues anyway. She might have a couple now, but generally she's going to be good against a lot of the hard engaged picks. So Janna, well, if you're going to play Enchanter, honestly, it might be worth learning in Janna if you're not comfortable with it already. I think now's the time to play Janna if you are an Enchanter main. Like, it's the most obvious pick in a tank meta. Brand is still tier 1 just because he always does well in like the lower elos. It's kind of insane. Like, he's always like the top mage, always, in terms of like raw damage output. he will still be number 1 on damage if you want to play hard carry. I will say also, like, if you're up against tank supports, you are more vulnerable against those, like the Nautilus and stuff, but you're also going to be doing more damage to them, and that's why Brand is Brand. He's an anti-tank mage. So yeah, like, Brand will still get some decent value, and with the door and shield nerfs as well, it means that, like, there's a few like outline cases where, you know, people are taking door and shields. It doesn't matter anymore because it doesn't heal for as much. So I think Brand, if you are in like bronze and silver in particular, you're going to be fine. Maybe he would move down to a tier 2 in like plat, and maybe high gold. But if you're an unranked to silver, I think Brand is still easily a tier 1 pick. Annie, very, very strong right now. Not for the reason you probably think. I did go over it slightly in the patch notes, but the main reason is that the movement speed, the retaliation, when they hit Annie, and if you got a Rylai's, or if you hit anyone with the shield, sorry, then they get slowed. So you have catch up there, or you have getaway. You have a very strong getaway mechanic or an engage mechanic, and you can use that shield on anybody. It's just basically a better Karma. It's just outright better than Karma right now. Moving on to Rel. Rel will be probably the highest win rate tank going into for high elo. You probably have some slight fall off there as you fall down in the elos. So round about silver, maybe gold, Rel might not be the strongest tank that you can necessarily play, but she still will be very, very, very good. You'll be looking more towards like the Rakan, mainly because you're not as punished if you do a bad engage on Rakan because you have the E to dash out, whereas if you engage with Rel, you're kind of stuck there for a good chunk of time. So kind of the same with like the Leona issue, but Rel, in the terms of her raw numbers and her kit and her crowd control, not just on that one target but like on multiple targets, whereas Leona's generally more focused on one target. Rel has very good AoE crowd control. So her as a champion, she will probably be the highest win rate in plat plus, maybe gold plus, and she's definitely going to be like top 2 tanks for silver plus, I think. And as I said before, Rakan should be in a really, really good place right now. With his dashes, he got recently buffed, his Q got buffed. I think he had a W buff as well, damage buff. So generally Rakan's doing pretty well as well. So Rakan's a really good tank option pick as well. I think those are probably going to be the 2 highest win rate picks. But once again, if you are new to playing tank support, I would highly recommend looking at something like Nautilus, as he's got a much easier kit, honestly, easier to execute kit. Now Sona, I know we talked about Nami, about her being vulnerable to tanks, vulnerable to the mana regeneration and going out of mana more often. She's a low tier 1. She was probably the strongest pick in tier 1 now. Last patch. This patch, she's a low tier 1. I think overall, Sona mid game is still going to be extremely strong, and you're going to be going tier anyway, so you won't be hit as much by the mana nerfs, because you would always do Archangel Sona, right? Well, hopefully you will. I'm feeling not overly confident in her being tier 1, but at worst case she's tier 2, and I think if you want to play an enchanter that isn't Janna, Sona should be the one that you're looking towards, mainly, as I said, because of the mid-game capability. I was talking about on stream actually about a build where you go, there could be a realm of possibility where you go Relic Shield and then have like a minion dematerializer in your kit, because if you don't have to use a few Qs to poke the enemy, you're saving mana. It does mean that you're going to get a few less passive stacks, but you could play it super passive, do minion dematerializer charges on the cannon minions when you feel like you can't help last hit them with the Relic Shield, and there could be a realm where you play the most annoying heal bot, basic like hiding in the backline Sona during laning phase, and then guaranteeing the first few cannon minions for your AD carry, I think that could be a possibility until you start getting like your tier 2 boots and a tier. Then you can start maybe moving into like the occasional Q tap in terms of getting like stacks. I think that's a build potentially worth trying out, but even if you go like the normal build, I think she'll be fine mid game onwards. It's just that laning phase, you're probably just gonna have to play just a little bit more safer, and it will also mean because the enemy has slightly, if it's a tank and with relic shield, they're gonna have slightly higher base health regeneration, so that means that your little bits of Q poke are even littler now. So there isn't as much incentive to harass on like the champions like Nami and Soraka, and well, Soraka has incentive because of a W, but not as much incentive to harass on Nami, not as much incentive to harass on Sona. So I think you could probably play it like Giga safe. So Janna, Sona play like that kind of. They can play the Giga safe. There's going to be some Janna mains that are going to be annoyed at me saying that. I playing Janna aggressively and I throw up my Qs and whatever. But both of these champions can be played Giga passively, and you can annoy the crap out the enemy tank, and you can make him blunder by just doing nothing. It's sometimes doing nothing is the best answer to tanks, because they will make their own mistakes. They will go under your turret for no reason, etc. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the tier list and the rundown. We nearly hit an hour for this one, so I do apologize, but this is probably the biggest support change for a very long time. Let me know how you feel about the support changes. I'm quite sad, honestly. I'm not a huge advocate for tank supports. I like playing my enchanters and mages, and I think a lot of you guys like playing enchanters and mages as well, because the views on the tank videos don't do so well, whereas when I'm playing enchanters and mages, you guys seem more interested. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll see how the patch goes, and I'll keep you informed if anything major changes. All the best, berries. Good luck on the rift. Hopefully it's not too miserable for us, and if you are a tank support player, then I hope you enjoy the patch. All the best. Take care. See you tomorrow for another video. Bye.